touched on the topic gluten beforehand,
Oh, okay.
and you said that you have some issues with it. So would you be so kind to touch on this a little bit more, and also in regarding with sprouting gluten-containing food? And Brenda, could you share your opinion as well?
Yes, so, gluten definitely is a big problem in today's. And so many kids have problems, especially digestive problems because of gluten. And, so the studies that came out about that it actually quadrupled the risk of diabetes type 1 actually came out of Munich Hospital 40 years ago.
Munich.
Yeah, and the studies here in America came out a few years ago, and it said, oops, if you have diabetes type 1, you can't have gluten. And I thought, well, 40 years ago, we already knew that. And our kids are brought up without gluten. There's so many kids that have now celiac disease. And, it's because we've been overdoing it. We've had so much of the wheat flour in all kinds of forms, and we got allergic to it. So it's a big problem. And of course, if I sprout, so I can take the grains that has gluten, like the oats, which doesn't have much, but still, and the rye and the corn, the barley and the wheat. Wheat, of course, by the time we grow it 7 days, it's a totally different thing. And very few, there's like one person a year that comes to the Institute that can't take the wheatgrass. And then
They're just lying.
No, they just can't. But it's like one person a year. And then we exchange it for blue-green algae instead. And they can drink it, and then they can do whatever we do. We do a lot of things with wheatgrass. We can't tell you all of it. We put it everywhere. So gluten definitely is a big deal for gastrointestinal problem, colitis, Crohn's. It's huge, and
Autism?
Autism, of course. Any parents with a child with autism that stops gluten will see an improvement. So we don't have any gluten at the Institute, and if we use grains that have gluten, they're all sprouted. And like you hear,
Well, explain again what you said so we clarify. What happens to the chemical process when you germinate? Well, no, the amino acids, the proteins become usable because it goes from a complex protein to the amino acids. The essential fats become essential fatty acids. Very easy for the cell to pick up. And the carbohydrates, simple sugars. So this is why, again, you go back, it's similar. If you take a wheat and try to chew it, you'd never swallow that. You'd break your teeth in the process. Soften it, and the softening process becomes digestibility of it. And keep going back to the fact now, we wouldn't have naturally eaten these foods at all at one point. We would have preferred, and I did an experiment back in Boston. This is when I was just a kid. It was maybe 1981, 82. I just had become the director. And I said, do we still have any instinct at all? Because I started to notice at that point when my head got clear, I didn't like romaine lettuce and I didn't like iceberg lettuce. I would prefer the light leafy green lettuce. And I thought, is that me doing that or psychological? So I used to put lettuce out for a 2.5-month period, for a 10-week period, and watch what the people chose. We'd have 100 guests or so, and I'd put it out, and inevitably, everyone instinctually went for the light leafies. And then, of course, when that was gone, they would go and take the more standard. So even though iceberg lettuce is the lettuce we all get everywhere in the world when you have a salad, and that's what people are familiar with, instinctually we still want light leafy things. And the germination gives you that. Makes it easy.
I have a couple of things to say. First, I just wanted to thank you for coming up here and presenting this information. It's a wonderful thing. I want to touch on sprouting. Brenda, you ran through like a whole list of stuff. I've been sprouting pulses for over 2 decades successfully, but I'm sprouting one that you didn't mention, and I want to know what you think of, if you consider it a larger unsproutable bean. That's Adzuki. You can answer me when I'm done. And the other thing is, a lot of other beans, I've been hearing things lately in the social media and on the internet about beans and leptins. Now, if either of the Clements could speak to those because of their success with sprouting, about leptins and sprouts. That's basically it.
Well, adzuki beans, I haven't seen research. Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't tell at first if there was sound coming out of the microphone. Like I said, I've been sprouting pulses successfully for over 2 decades, but I still have problems sprouting successfully smaller beans, smaller seeds, the radishes, the alfalfa, the broccoli, and so forth. No matter no matter what rinsing technique or medium that I am laying
Isn't
them
that
down
funny?
on, I'm not having a success with them. If you could maybe speak to that after answering the other question, that would be wonderful.
So I believe that adzuki beans would be safe to sprout. Yeah. So, and then the other question about, I think that was your question, really. About, about lectins. Well, lectins, that's the hemagglutinins in beans, and there's a lot of, it's one of the probably most popular diet craze right now is a lectin-free diet, and so it's a very much more of a meat-centered way of eating for sure to get rid of lectins. Lectins are naturally present in plants as a, to help protect the plants, and so they're there, and so but the probably the most concentrated source of lectins in the human diet would be legumes. And when you cook legumes for 15 to 20 minutes, you pretty much completely destroy the lectins. And most people eating legumes on a regular basis are cooking them for probably an hour and a half, depending on their size. If you're cooking legumes, you want them to be able to just crush with your tongue on the top of the roof of your mouth. And the lectins would be gone. And to me, I always say this, but the acid test to me is look at what the healthiest, longest lived people on the planet are doing. Every single blue zone, the one food they all commonly eat is legumes. If they were poisoned because of the lectins, they probably wouldn't be the longest lived, healthiest people on the planet.
Or they're the luckiest longest lived people.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of ridiculous to me. And then you look at the studies, the mortality studies on legumes versus meat. Legumes, the studies on mortality consistently show benefits and increased longevity with legume consumption, and with meat, they consistently show reduced, longevity, increased mortality, and increased risk of pretty much every chronic disease we can think of. So,
Good.
yeah.
They're part of that the people in the 5 blue zones. Matter of fact, one of my colleagues and good friends, Dr. Yu, happens to be Japanese, and he went down and hung out and lived with him. He said, I want to figure out how to live to 105. And he gave me some insight that was amazing. It's amazing how extraordinarily popular people can come when they are marketed well. And now this gentleman who wrote this book basically has sold 68 million copies of that book. I don't know of another health book that even come close to that, to be honest with you. I mean, if you put the 10 best authors together, I don't think we match that. That's a lot of health books. So I read it, but I forget what's the name of it again. Yeah. What is it?
Plant paradox?
Plant paradox. Plant paradox. Okay, now I didn't, I went through it. I was reading 2 other books because I was sort of disinterested. It is pseudoscience. So Dr. Fuhrman last night, who I've obviously read all of the references in there. Now I didn't read it, so I'm just quoting Dr. Fuhrman. So I can't confirm this, but I can't imagine he's making this up. He said when he looked at several of the references, they weren't real. That the gentleman cherry-picked. I know one thing, his resolution is to eat meat, and that's wrong. So he's telling you, don't eat beans, which, by the way, the longest living people in the world eat, but in fact, chicken's fine for it. Yeah, is it? Yeah. So, I mean, and we don't have to make this guy bad. Maybe he had the right intent. Maybe he really meant well. Maybe that's where he is at this point. You're all being cheated, by the way. All 3 of us will know more tomorrow. So we don't know as much today as we know tomorrow. And so whatever it is, let's hope he came from the purest right intent, and that's where he is at this point. But sadly, if you can affect 68 million people and the people they touch, and they now start eating chicken rather than cucumbers, I'm a little concerned about that.
And then there was a question for you, Anna Maria, about the
On
little
sprouting, oh yeah,
seeds.
that's odd. The easy ones you're having a hard time with.
Yeah.
Yeah, the broccoli, alfalfa, and all of those. I mean, usually we at the institute sometimes we grow, and still right in a jar. But then it's the water quality because so
It could be the seed too.
it could be the seed. Yeah, you have organic seeds, and you had and you had good water. It's filtered water.
You have to
It's
really,
not just
really,
tap water.
if there's a little bit of schmut, a little bit of dirt inside of the jar, it could contaminate the whole thing.
Yeah, something good to clean the jar, like Shackley has a basic G, and you put it in a big spray bottle, just a little bit, fill it up with water, that you could wash the bottle with that. And make
Peroxide.
sure. Mhm.
Go to the dollar store, buy 2 peroxides, sit
Yeah.
it in. Yeah,
Yeah.
that could get it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, don't give up. Keep doing it.